right, it's Midwest Swing, part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network and Midwest Swing Live here on Periscope. I'm Brandon Warne. I'm your host. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon_WARNE. And we are part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network, which you can find on Twitter at Zone Coverage MN. Glad to be with you here tonight. Late Saturday night. We're going to hang out here for a little while. I did want to get to a couple of things. Pick and Shovelware has graciously sponsored this show now for a little while. Check them out at pickandshovelware.com. Use the promo code MWS to get 15% off your order. You can get cool Minnesota sports apparel. They have all kinds of cool designs that, just really, really great. Not only Twin specific, but they got Wild, they got Vikings especially too. All kinds of fun stuff. So check them out. Pickandshovelware.com. Keyword MWS. Also, I've started a Patreon page, patreon.com/MidwestSwing. If you want to support the show, feel free. Don't feel obligated. No donation too big. Obviously, no donation too small. If you appreciate the show, want to contribute in a different way, you can feel free to do that again. Patreon.com/MidwestSwing. Otherwise, 5-star reviews on iTunes are huge. Those are good for us too, as well, as far as getting advertising, moving up on the iTunes charts, and all those sorts of things. You can check us out iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Libsyn, all kinds of different places. YouTube is where this will be found after we're live. So we're just going to have some fun here. Obviously, tough night for the Twins, losing 19-6, almost transposed those numbers. But again, a very difficult day at the park for the Twins. Tampa Bay really gets into the Twins bullpen. Jose Barrios, not great either, pitching into the seventh inning, but having a hiccup in the seventh, and that's when everything kind of fell apart for the Twins. So we can talk about that. We can talk trade deadline, selling, buying, All-Star break. We can talk about pretty much whatever anybody wants to talk about. If you want to send a question, please, at Brandon_Warne on Twitter. In my opinion, the Periscope interface gets rid of the questions too fast, making it difficult for me to focus on the questions, focus on what I'm trying to read, focus on making my point. And if I'm in the middle of a point and you send me a question, I'm not going to remember it 2 minutes later when I'm done rambling on about the one I'm doing right now. So, send me questions on Twitter if you can. I will try to read them on the screen, but I can't promise anything. I will say these over and over again. You can also always feel free to DM me questions in between shows. I'd like to do these a little bit more frequently and a little bit more regularly, hopefully once a week, so we can kind of get used to doing these sorts of things here on a semi-regular basis. So hopefully maybe like a Friday night sort of thing or a Thursday night for a Friday morning publish so that it can kind of become a regular thing. So again, 19-6 loss for the Twins. Jose Barrios, 6 earned runs in 6 innings. I thought it was a little bit strange that Paul Molitor sent him back out there for the 7th. Doesn't record any outs in the 7th, and the rest is kind of history. It almost feels a little bit like the Houston game last year where Irvin Santana started, and by the end of it, the Astros had scored something like 14 runs in the last 2 or 3 innings. So if it's hard to get too wound up about one day, as negative as it was, because the Twins have obviously had a good homestand, 8-2, 1 game to go, and they, one game left. Fernando Romero coming up to start tomorrow gives them a fairly good chance to win. It's a bullpen game for the Rays with Ryan Stanek starting, or Stanek. So not quite like facing everybody when they're usually doing a bullpen game or another team. This is a planned bullpen game. It's part of the thing that the Rays have been doing all season long. So it's not going to be quite as fluid, but at the same time, should be kind of a fun thing to watch up front, up close and personal. I will be covering for Zone Coverage tomorrow. I will also be writing today's recap after I log off from here and start processing this on YouTube. So I will have that up on Zone Coverage tonight as well. So zonecoverage.com for all your Twins needs as far as coverage. I don't want to dwell too much on today's game, or if you're watching this after midnight, yesterday's game, technically. We'll call it Saturday's game. But Eddie Rosario, 3 hits. Kind of interesting that, Wilson Ramos goes down with an injury. Now Salvador Perez will play in the All-Star game. And it almost was like Rosario was trying to put in the minds of the decision makers just one last thing, like, hey, I still deserve to be in this game if you guys are looking for position players. Paul Molitor said on Friday that he suspects things could still trickle in on as late as Sunday for any last opening spots, such as the ones that got Charlie Morton into the All-Star game, Jeremy Jeffress. Who am I missing? I know there was one that came up yesterday too. So yeah, all kinds of fun things going on with the Twins outside of the 19-6 loss. If there's any, you could call it a silver lining, the Indians lost today. And so the Twins didn't lose any ground. Now, granted, that doesn't really feel great when the Twins are still 7.5 games out, but it is good. Okay, I'm seeing someone saying Indians catcher made it today, so I'm assuming that means Yan Gomes is in the All-Star game instead of so they replace a catcher with a catcher, which I think was always kind of the plan anyway, which makes sense. So with that in mind, too, check out the stats for AL catchers this year. It's unbelievable. Only Perez and Willie Ramos are the qualified, which means I think it's 3.1 plate appearances per team game played. And so there's 2 guys that were qualified for like the batting title, and then everyone else is well under that threshold. So not only that, but quality too. The league average line for a catcher for the AL was like 229, I can't remember what the on base was, like 270 something, and then like a 350 or 360 slugging. I think it's gonna be like a 290 something on base. But yeah, so the average AL catcher this year has really struggled. So that was part of why I wasn't sure they'd bring another catcher. I don't know how many catchers they have. I would suspect you probably want at least 2, probably 3. So it makes sense for Gomes to make it in that sense. But, if anything were to come up yet still, I know that Rosario would be a great fit. But as noted on my Ask BW column that posted during Friday night's game, players that are, outfielders, they don't pull out of the game quite nearly as often as obviously pitchers do, not only due to schedule, but also just, health things kind of pop up too. So I don't think it's terribly likely that Rosario is going to have to cancel his plans for the week. But hey, I think everyone, in terms of fans, is rooting for that because he's obviously had a very good first half of the season. So yeah, he had 3 hits today. Eduardo Escobar with a couple of hits. We got Bobby Wilson with 2 hits. He started to heat up a little bit. Obviously not an offensive dynamo by any stretch of the mind. But also Robbie Grossman with he was 1 for 3. He's up to 252 average, 333 on base, 372 slugging. So quietly, Robbie Grossman has done a nice job of turning his season around. Now with that said, I'm not trying to go to bat for Robbie, so to speak, but he's just looked better of late with Logan Morrison on the shelf. He's going to get a few more swings, and so that's a good time for him to pick up the slack. I know obviously that throw he had back to the infield today was not great, and it left a lot of people wondering why Jake Cave had come out of the game. And at this point, it seems like Paul Molitor is really anti-letting Cave face too many lefties. Obviously, the lefty, the side-arming lefty, Kolarek, was in the game, and that's a tough read for any lefty, let alone a guy who's got about 20 games in the big leagues. So, in some ways, I understand taking him out of there. But he's been hitting well enough too that maybe he should, he should get a chance too. So, I don't know. Again, please, if you can, please send me questions on Twitter. I have TweetDeck on the screen beneath this, so it's easier for me to see them. Because I do have a couple questions trickling in here, and I don't want to lose sight of them. So, today's game was an abomination. I don't want to get back to it unless any questions come up. Let's go to the question board. So far, we've got one from Ryan Sawyer that says, any thoughts on Barrios' velocity being down lately? I know it had been reported they were trying to make him tone it down, which seems silly. So, I don't know. I'm going to have to probably look into it a little more. I've only kind of heard some things secondhand. The one thing I did notice was Addison Reed's velocity was down. And everyone's saying, oh, this is one of those disabled list stints because he's pitching poorly and they just want to give him some time off. I don't know if you can ever rule that out as actually being a thing. Teams can't do that and say they do that for procedure and legality reasons, but they can point back to mid-May where he went from throwing 91, 92 to the last few weeks where he was 89 to 91. For a guy like that, maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't, but it's enough to say, hey, your elbow is bothering you. Go sit for 7, 8, 10 days or maybe 7, 8 days and then go on a minor league rehab. But I did see him showing Bert Blyleven where on his elbow it had been bothering him. So, again, I don't know that there's a lot of incentive to lie about that sort of stuff. Beyond that, too, Addison Reed's a terrific reliever. There's got to be some reason that he's pitching poorly. He's not, particularly old to the point where you'd expect him to be breaking down or anything like that. So I do think that the injury is, again, legit. I think it's something that's hopefully minor, something that's going to, calm down after a few days off, or maybe even 7 to 10 days off from throwing. He obviously worked a very big, very heavy workload in the first half. Prior to the last couple weeks, he did have a stretch. I want to say it was in June where he had like 5 or 6 days off, maybe the beginning of June. But he, didn't really bounce back from that. So maybe there was something going on at that time too, where Molitor had become aware that he was, not feeling too good. So, yeah, over the last 6 weeks, that's where the numbers started to tumble. Anyway, back to Berrios. As far as velocity, I would wonder about, potential fatigue, that sort of thing. I mean, this is the first, I guess maybe it's not his first full big league season, but I don't think he broke camp with the team last year, if I'm remembering correctly, but I could be wrong. But anyway, they've been riding him pretty hard too, I think. So it'll be something I'll have to dig into, and maybe I can, write a story on that too. Just workload. The one thing to remember about first half, second half numbers too, and this is actually very important. I've seen it on Twitter quite a bit. Oh yeah, World Baseball Classic. Thank you, Grant, one of my dudes from Twitter, mentioning that about Berrios. So okay, that makes a lot of sense. So the one big thing here though with All-Star break stuff this year, first half, second half numbers and that sort of thing. This year, the first half is a lot later in terms of number of games. And so a lot of teams are playing 85, 90, 91, 92 games rather than the typical, I don't know what it usually is, 84, 85. So some of the counting stats are going to be a bit askew, and they're not going to be even for first half, second half. Actually, that also brings me back to a really good point that Mike Petrillo of MLB.com and StatCast made about guys tailing off in the second half after being in the home run derby. And in general, guys in the home run derby are overachieving in the first half, and they're going to tail off from a sheer regression standpoint. Not only because it's warm in July, August, and into September for the dog days of September, but guys like Max Muncy, I mean, we've never seen him play like this at any point in his career, let alone, I mean, he's only been in the big leagues for a couple years. So the natural regression won't have anything to do necessarily, I mean, it could have something to do with the home run derby, but more likely it's just that he's playing to a closer to his true talent level number rather than, who knows, maybe he's the Chris Taylor this year that breaks out for them and he's a great player and it lasts all year. I don't know, but we'll find out. Anyway, back to Berrios. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just going to have to dig into the numbers and see, because I think when it comes to toning it down, if they ask him to tone it down, it's probably more of his training, because he's one of the most tireless workers that you will ever see between starts, with his running, his throwing, his fitness. He does everything 100 miles per hour, and while that works, he's 24. I think he's a 1993 birth, so he'll be 25 this year at some point, I think. You can keep pushing your body and getting that out of it, but I'm not sure if that's sustainable over the long run, just because of how taxing pitching is besides. And so he may have to go into more recovery mode, kind of he just turned 24. Okay, so he may have to go into more recovery mode between starts, as opposed to balls to the wall. Again, you can't say enough good things about his work ethic, his persona, both off and on the mound. But if they ask him to back it off, I do think that it would be for recovery's sake, which is a good thing. John Miller says, I consider Grossman Molitor's version of Punto or Tolbert. No reason he should be getting at bats, but here we are. No matter how hot he is, shouldn't be stealing at bats from anyone. So I'm not the craziest Robbie Grossman fan you'll find, but he did make a good point, is that when you have a switch hitter on the bench who is going to give you a good at bat, in the sense of seeing pitches and that sort of thing, it's helpful, because you're not. It's a chess piece that you can play at a certain point in the game that's matchup proof, in the sense that if they go get a lefty or a righty to counter you, Grossman as a switch hitter is going to be a good counter to that. And he's still going to give you a good at-bat regardless of if he gets some funky lefty or a Pat Neshek type on the right side. So as much as I think Grossman does kind of fit that mold as a Punto Tolbert kind of guy, I think he's got a value in a way that maybe like Zach Duke, when he's going good, does too, in that he's not a strict lefty one-out guy or a loogie, if you're familiar with that term. You can kind of use guys to match up against whatever the other team throws at you, and you'll always have the upper hand. And I think that, we see managers that can outthink themselves or maybe just be one move behind the other manager. I do think that having a guy like Grossman or Duke in that case gives you that natural leg up, which is kind of nice. So I don't know that Grossman survives the season. I will say that. I don't know if a team will want him at the deadline for giving him at-bats off the bench or maybe a spare outfielder. I don't know. But if Byron Buxton comes back healthy before roster expansion and Jake Cave doesn't fall off the radar screen, which we've seen no proof of, but again, he's a rookie, so anything could happen, I do think Cave has to have the natural nod as the fourth outfielder. I mean, Jake Cave's been unbelievable. He's defensively, I know he slipped and fell today, but as far as plays, I don't think he would have made that play anyway. I haven't looked at the StatCast or anything like that to really try gauge how likely it would have been. But if you were to judge Cave's defense to this point, I think you'd have to give him a passing grade, a solid B+ for sure, if not higher, because he's made some pretty nice plays out in center. Obviously, the early in the homestand made, I think it was 3 great plays, 3 straight nights, and was just wonderful out there. So it's allowed the Twins to be more patient with Byron Buxton. Not to say that if they had Zach Granite out there and he wasn't playing well, they wouldn't still be patient with Buxton, but it does cushion the blow a little bit to the point now where, on days where Garver plays behind the plate and Cave starts in center, 1 through 9, the Twins have a lineup of guys who are going to give you good at-bats. I'm probably higher on Bobby Wilson than most just because of his defense, but the days Bobby plays, you obviously have the number 9 spot to contend with. When it's Garver, again, 1 through 9, that offense can really get rolling, and we saw that against Eovaldi on Friday night. So I really do like how this lineup is going right now, and that's without Miguel Sano, Byron Buxton. Jorge Polanco still kind of getting into the mix, getting into the swing of things, but they're I wouldn't say deep, but it's just 9 guys who are going to give you good plate appearances, and we saw with how they ran up the pitch count on Snell on Friday and on Eovaldi on Saturday, and then obviously Thursday, Friday. I'm sorry, I'm getting my days screwed up here. And they did it even to Archer a little bit today, but I think Cash learned his lesson and got out in front of that and lifted Archer before it could have gotten ugly. And granted, the Twins got to the next guy a little bit too, but I do think the Twins are taking better plate appearances with this current complement of offensive players than they have at any point this season. And so to get back to the original point, I'm not crazy fond of Robbie Grossman as a hitter, but I do think that as a chess piece off the bench, it'd be better if they had a 4-man bench instead of a 3-man bench. But he's all right. He's not great, but he's all right. Mike Meyer-Schleif wants to know if it seems Duke, Reed, Hildenberger are also overused. Are other teams mistreating their relievers as the Twins seem to be? It's difficult because each of those guys has gone through a stretch where they've struggled. With Hildenberger, it was early. With Duke, it's just kind of been up and down. With Reed, it was obviously lately. And what that's forced Mahler to do is really mix and match in the 8th inning, which has been difficult when you've got certain guys you can and can't trust. And Presley squarely fits into that mix of being overused as well. I think it's possible you could call them overused, but at the same time, it's very very unusual for me to see a situation and say, okay, well, I would have used this guy instead of him. You want to give Matt McGill more work, but he's more length. In a couple big spots he's worked, it's kind of blown up on him. So, I'm not super into giving him more work. I think we all can agree Matt Belisle's got to go because I think today he showed it. There's just nothing left there, and I think we all are to this point aware of that. I'm not trying to stomp on him while he's down or anything. I just think there's really no reason Tyler Duffy, or if you want to go off the 40 man and get Nick Anderson up here, Buznitz is up here, but there are arms in Rochester who deserve a look over Matt Belisle at this point, and there's no denying that. Gabriel Moya is I think terrific. Get him back up here. He's a guy that can get lefties and righties out, give you a little bit of length, and he's just funky. I think Gabriel Moya's got a big time future in this league as a middle reliever, 6th, 7th inning guy. Not as a closer, not necessarily as even a setup guy, but I think Moya is just one of those sneaky good guys that could last in the league for a long time. And I think the Twins should be taking advantage of that. And so Jake Reed, another guy who deserves a look over Belisle at this point. And so, yeah, I just think it's time. Or if you want to bring up, maybe you keep Romero up and leave him in the bullpen to limit his innings after Santana comes back. I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know at this point I just don't think it's Matt Belisle, and I just don't think you can have him rejoin the team in Kansas City in the opener for the second half. I don't see it. John Miller, again, if Grossman has value, it's maybe for an at-bat, but the 6th inning, big negative defensive value, hit him in the 8th or 9th. Well, here's the thing, John. I'll say this. In a perfect world where everyone's healthy, Grossman doesn't even really have a role because you have an offense where you wouldn't really pinch hit for anybody. And so right now, pinch hitters are a little more valuable because the offense is a little bit spotty with, A-Ray Adrianza early in the year not hitting. Gregorio Petit getting way too much playing time. They've cycled through some players who are definitely guys in need of pinch hitters. And so when everybody gets healthy and everybody gets back and suddenly you're scrambling to find playing time, not for Adrianza, but maybe Escobar. If Sano settles in at third, Polanco at short, Dozier at second. And again, I'm not sure that all that happens. Maybe one of those guys gets traded in the next 2 weeks. But if all the Twins players are healthy and clicking, you've got probably Miguel Sano taking DH at bats from Morrison at first so Escobar can play third. But you've got an embarrassment of riches in position players for probably the first time in a very long time for the Twins. And you don't need Grossman to pinch hit. You maybe just have him as an extra body. And also, if you have a 4-man bench, you can go Garver, Adrianza, Cave, Grossman. You can have Grossman hit for somebody and then replace him with Cave defensively. And again, you don't really want to have a move where you use 2 players because that's a lot of moving chess pieces for very minimal value in the game. But it does allow you to not get dinged by Robbie Grossman coming on defensively in the 8th inning or whatever it might be if you're really worried about a fly ball or a throw like today coming back and biting you really bad. So again, when this team's at full strength and knock on wood, that'll eventually be sometime. It's been not at all this year. If they get back to full complement, full strength, I don't think there's a role for Robbie Grossman on this team. And so I don't know if it's a trade, if it's a DFA situation. I don't know. Again, if you've got questions, send them to me on Twitter. We'll take a couple more if people can shoot them over. Otherwise, we're getting close to wrapping up here. I like to keep it under a half hour for YouTube purposes and for uploading and for podcast and all that fun stuff. So, yeah, again, if you have questions at Brandon_Warne, please check out zonecoverage.com. You can go to pickandshovelware.com, keyword MWS, 15% off your order. Get all kinds of cool shirts, hats, all that fun stuff, sweatshirts, all those sorts of things. Patreon.com/MidwestSwing. No pressure. It's all on your own, like a free will offering. If you want to support the show, you can. Don't feel obligated. I'm just happy you guys are checking it out. It's a labor of love for me. You guys make it worth it. So thank you so much. We got John with another one here. Thank you for the answers. Do you think Wade could provide, and he's Lamont Wade, could provide more value than Grossman, or is he just a next year kind of guy? What are my thoughts on him? It's impossible not to love the approach of Lamont Wade. We'd be talking about a really, really nice player if he could play center. My understanding is he's strictly left or right. And probably, I think I think it's better in left, which I don't know that matters much because right now with how the Twins are constructed, I still don't really understand why Rosario plays left and Kepler plays right. I feel like the other way around would make sense, but maybe it's has to do with range or throwing or throwing arm or something. I don't know, but I do think that Wade could be another guy too in that fourth outfielder mix. Again, the luxury you have when all three of your starting outfielders can play center is that your fourth doesn't have to, and that allows you to have a Robbie Grossman or a Lamont Wade as your fourth, which is nice. You get a little different profile. You get an on-base profile with Grossman, and Wade is cut from the same mold, maybe just a little more dynamic offensive talent. And so I really like Lamont Wade, and I think if they wanted to move on from Grossman, they'd have a ready-made, obviously, replacement in him. I think they have the offense in Rochester, by the way, has gotten so much better in the last 2 months. They went and got that kid from the Astros, whose name is going to completely escape me right now. But they cut Chris Carter. Kenny Vargas is swinging a little better. Taylor Featherston's gone. Their offense is a little better equipped. Again, maybe it helps that Byron Buxton was down there. Zach Granite's swinging a little better now, I think. Obviously, he really, really went through some stuff too. So, their infield looks a little better. They just have a little more talent offensively. They did release Cameron Rupp, if people didn't see. So I suspect Astudillo will be going back down there in the near future. Taylor Motter's back up there, who can put up some numbers at AAA. Hasn't so much this year, but obviously is capable with the bat. So, I feel bad for the people that go to the Rochester games and end up getting, pitching duels because the offense was really struggling early this year. But Wade is one of the guys on that offense that I'm really excited about. Do I think he's a big league starter? Not necessarily, but maybe. I mean, it all comes down to what they need. I mean, they have Max Kepler and Eddie Rosario in left and right, and you could convince me that they'll be here for 10 years each. Or maybe they flip one of them, bring somebody up. Larnick someday could be up here, Kirilov. They've got all kinds of talent in this organization. And so there's a lot of moving parts that are going to have to happen here in the next couple years to figure it all out. I don't know. All right, I think that's going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Saturday night to hang out with me, Midwest Swing. You can find us at Midwest Swing Pod on Twitter, at Zone Coverage MN, at Brandon_Warne for me. Again, Midwest Swing. Find us on patreon.com/Midwest Swing, pickandshovelware.com, keyword MWS. That is for Midwest Swing. That's what it's short for. And so thank you for taking time out of your Saturday night. We will catch you on the flip-flop.